Nothing, and I mean nothing, is worse than a bully. While I was lucky and smart enough to avoid the worst, I had my fair share of it growing up. I'm sure you experienced it in one way or another too. Today's picks deal with the whole wide world of bullying in horror. This is ML Miller Fright's Best in Horror Countdown 2024 through 2025. The Rule of Jenny Penn was released on March 7th, 2025, and is streaming on Shudder from IFC Films. It's directed by James Ashcroft and written by James Ashcroft, Eli Kent, and Owen Marshall. Jeffrey Rush plays Stefan Mortensen, a judge who suffers a stroke in the opening minutes and requires to be placed in a nursing home for recovery. There he meets Dave Creeley, played by John Lithgow, who is the local bully, taking his wrath out against his feebler peers at the home. When Stefan refuses to acknowledge Creeley's superiority at the home, a bitter feud begins. The Rule of Jenny Penn is one dark tale, and if there's any complaint I have at all, it's that I didn't get to spend more time watching these seasoned actors do what they do best. Rush is wonderful as a man who has lived a cold life as a judge and is now paying for it by being ultimately alone in this nursing home. He contests that he will soon be out of the home, so he doesn't want to make any friends or participate in any of the activities. While one would think that would make this character dislikable, the way the film intimately follows Stefan through his struggles, you can't help but feel sorry for the guy. Rush is able to bring humanity to an utterly inhuman person by showing all of the gory details of how debilitating a stroke can be. Seeing Rush play such a vulnerable role where he's in conflict with his own body is heartbreaking. But you can't help but root for him because John Lithgow gives such a diabolical performance as Creeley. Still, while Creeley does some truly despicable acts, Lithgow somehow makes you feel for him as well. Creeley is nuanced in his madness, and those of you, like me, who thought the Batman movies missed out by not having him play the ventriloquist, get a taste of that insanity here as Creeley walks around with his support puppet on the end of his hand. It really is creepy the way he makes the doll peer through curtains and around corners, and Lithgow proves he's the king of the hill in one scene where the old folks are all dancing and Lithgow goes out there and turns it into a mosh pit, and it's truly twisted. He's simply a force of nature here, decimating everyone in his path, but like most bullies, his insecurities are obvious. I used to work in the therapy business, and early on when I had a series of internships giving us students experience with different populations, I knew right away geriatric facilities just weren't for me. Maybe it was because of my own fear of getting old and helpless. Maybe it was because the patients would often mistake me for their son or even late husband. I just knew I would never work in a place like that. This movie didn't change my mind about that at all. Director James Ashcroft captures the day-to-day monotony and the underlying madness of work in a facility for the elderly to a T. Working like an old folks' home version of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Rule of Jenny Penn is about one man fighting the system. It's only that this system happens to be represented not by a strict nurse, but by a horrible man wearing a puppet on his hand. Rush plays the will to fight that system, a system that has been in place as long as most in the home can remember, and how that will can be worn down to the nub over time. Seeing Rush go from hopeful to leave to inevitably accepting his fate is the stuff of nightmares for me. And as I am not getting any younger, this film hit me like a sledgehammer at times, as despite how much Stefan tried to reason with the staff, his words fall on deaf ears because in their eyes, he's not relevant anymore. That's just truly heart-shattering. But though the drama is amped to the max and much of the film is rooted in the real world, through terrifying hallucinations and dream sequences, the nightmare of Creeley and his puppet, Jenny Penn, are ever-present and horrifying. Not only that, but the lengths Creeley goes to exert his authority over the rest of his peers is equally horrible, as Creeley knows how to cheat the system and does so with devilish glee and dire intent. He may not move fast, but Creeley's wrath is terrible indeed. If anything, the rule of Jenny Penn should come with a warning that you're going to be feeling depressed as all hell as you walk away from this one. It's an extremely sad watch. If you have an elderly parent or grandparent, this one's going to hit hard, and most likely will have you looking for any kind of alternative living situation than a home like this one depicted here. At the same time, the rule of Jenny Penn is a celebration of two actors who don't get top billing as often as they used to, and this film allows them to show that they still are in top form. My own prejudices against the elderly aside, the rule of Jenny Penn is one hell of a powerful film. It isn't bloody or filled with jump scares, but it does tap into that fear we all have of growing old, insignificant, and alone. That's scarier than any serial killer or found footage that I've ever seen, because it's real, and we all should be lucky enough to experience that. But even that's kind of fucked up. You want to survive the horrors of life, and you do, and then end up not in command of your own body, or your own senses, or your own freedoms. That's heavy, scary stuff, and the rule of Jenny Penn is riddled with those real, inevitable, and terrifying scares. Are you ready to face those fears? How you answer will be whether you're going to want to watch this movie or not. Shining the light on bullying on a more common level, GRAFTED focuses on how bullying warps and twists the already fragile mind of a teenage girl. Worth noting is GRAFTED. It was released on January 24th, 2025, and is streaming on Shudder. It's directed by Sasha Rainbow and written by Sasha Rainbow, Lee Murray, Mia Mamamara, and Huiling Ao. A young, brilliant, and socially awkward exchange student named Wei, played by Joanna Sun, leaves her home in China to live with her aunt Ling, played by Zhao Hu, and cousin Angela, played by Jess Hong, in New Zealand. While her professor, Paul, played by Jared Turner, is impressed with Wei's scientific know-how and agrees to take her as his assistant, Wei fails to fit in with Angela and her friends Eve, played by Eden Hart, and Jasmine, played by Seppi Toa. You see, Wei and her father were burned back in China, and her father was developing a skin graft technique to regrow damaged skin. But after her father's experiment ended in his death, Wei sets out to perfect his theories and carry on with his research. Taking notice of Wei's talent in the lab, Paul, who is up for tenure and without ideas of his own, intends to steal Wei's new skin graft formula and take credit for it himself. But Wei decides to use the formula on herself, resulting in a series of events that spell disaster for all involved. GRAFTED strongly resembles last year's amazing The Substance in many ways. While it is not as creative as that marvelous film, it does toy around with a lot of the same concepts, including the obsession to look good in today's society, the basic need to fit in and be relevant to others, and how messing with the natural order of things often comes back to haunt you big time. All of this occurs in GRAFTED as Wei tries her hardest to befriend her cousin's clique. Mixing in elements of Mean Girls, and maybe a bit of Heathers, Angela and her friends are not the friendliest to Wei, as Wei represents aspect of Angela's culture that she doesn't really want to acknowledge. The bullying that goes on against Wei is going to pull on the heartstrings, and it really succeeded in making me root for Wei to be better than trying to be like these mean girls. But if she did that, this wouldn't be a horror movie, would it? What transpires is a bit of body swapping as Wei's new skin grafting technique turns out to be only temporary and requires new skin to keep working, making Wei a vampire of sorts, in need of new faces to help her heal her own. This leads to some very heinous body horror as skin is ripped off, scraped off, clawed off, and shaved off in all kinds of toe-curling ways. These scenes get up close and personal and definitely will be too much for the weak-stomached. Still, the effects look good and practical, and much blood is spilled, so gorehounds are going to be happy about that. Logic sort of gets tossed out the window by the third act as Wei begins impersonating the people she steals the faces from. It's quite a leap that people in the film are actually fooled by Wei simply wearing the face of these other actresses, mainly because they have completely different body types than the short-statured Wei. I get it. We're supposed to suspend that kind of disbelief, but Wei gets into situations with people who intimately know the skin Wei is wearing, and one has to believe the cast has to be dumb as a rock for not noticing something is off. The cast is pretty solid all around. This is a film where not only do the actors have to play different characters, but they also have to play Wei wearing their skins. For the most part, this is successful, though I think there was an opportunity missed to have some kind of physical quirks that could have been added to Wei's performance and then reflected later on when the other actors are playing Wei. Instead, we're to believe Wei is such a chameleon that she's able to imitate these other characters without others noticing, and there really is nothing we know about Wei that indicate that she can do this. There's a scene where Wei attempts to mimic the way Angela and her friends are talking, but it's less than believable and only shows that she's no Rich Little in terms of impersonation. While again, it was very similar to the end of The Substance, I like the way Grafted wrapped up in a tragedy. It's different enough from The Substance to not be a complete ripoff. Most likely these two films were in production at the same time, but still the dark and grotesque tone is very similar. Grafted has some very grody gore and sports some solid acting from its entire cast. There is a poeticism to the way this one plays out, and I dug it quite a bit. I feel it's an inferior film compared to all of the heavy thematics The Substance tackled, but the similarities guarantee it would make for a thrilling, albeit gross, double feature. Grafted plays on a lower scale, mixing Mean Girls with the goppiest of body horror. I definitely recommend this one, but only if you have a strong stomach. As always, feel free to agree, disagree, or how about you play along at home and give me your own picks for your own favorite movies of the year. It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown. Be sure to hit all of those pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.